The entire structure of Western thinking rests on forgotten foundations. Over 2,000 years ago, a group of brilliant and enigmatic minds, known as the Pre-Socratic Philosophers, first dared to ask the biggest questions about reality, the cosmos, and our place within it. They were pioneers of reason, yet their deepest wisdom was profoundly esoteric, a spiritual path to cosmic understanding that has been nearly lost to time. By the end of this journey, you will see the world through their eyes and discover a lost key to understanding existence itself. We will explore why one thinker believed everything was made of water and how another saw the universe as an eternal, intelligent fire. What is the one big question about reality you feel remains unanswered today? Their world was one of emerging city-states and ancient temples, a time when the line between myth and reality was only just beginning to be drawn. Across the scattered Greek colonies of Ionia and southern Italy, from the bustling port of Miletus to the mystical city of Elea, a new kind of thinker emerged. These were the Pre-Socratics, a collection of brilliant and often isolated minds living roughly from the 6th to the 5th century before the Common Era. They were not a formal group with a shared doctrine, but rather a series of intellectual pioneers, each striking out on their own unique path. What united them was a revolutionary break from tradition. For the first time in the West, they turned away from stories of gods and goddesses to explain the world. Instead, they looked at the cosmos itself and asked a startlingly rational question: what is the fundamental substance, the single underlying principle from which everything else arises? The Greeks called this the arche, the first cause, the source and origin of all things. One man would gaze at the sea and declare that everything, from the stars to our own bodies, is ultimately water in different forms. Another would watch a flickering flame and see in it the essence of a living, intelligent, and eternal universe. They were mapping reality not with divine fables, but with observation and reason, seeking a single, elegant truth hidden within the chaos of appearances. This was the birth of both science and a deeply spiritual quest, a search for the one thing that makes the many possible. Yet this search for the arche was far more than an intellectual puzzle. For these first philosophers, to know the fundamental substance of the cosmos was to know the fundamental substance of oneself. Their philosophy was a lived experience, a transformative spiritual practice aimed at achieving a profound inner alignment with the universe's hidden order. When Thales declared that all was water, he was not merely proposing a primitive theory of matter. He was pointing toward a fluid, unifying principle that permeates all existence, inviting us to see the same essential nature within the flow of our own consciousness. To understand the arche was to achieve a state of harmony, to still the chaotic waves of the personal self by recognizing its source in the vast, cosmic ocean. This was the ultimate goal, a form of self-knowledge that could not be found in books, but only through a radical reorientation of one's entire being. Can you sense the difference between simply knowing a fact and truly understanding your connection to everything around you? Heraclitus would later call this the logos, a universal reason and fire that orders all things. To grasp the logos was not an academic achievement, it was to become aligned with the very process of eternal change, to embrace the constant flux of life without fear. This idea that wisdom leads to a fundamental inner transformation is the beating heart of esoteric traditions across the world. It is the alchemical process of turning base ignorance into golden understanding, not for power, but for peace. The Pre-Socratics were not just building the foundations of science, they were mapping the first steps of a Western spiritual path, one where the soul discovers its own divine logic by contemplating the logic of the cosmos. Thales stood at the edge of the sea and saw not a god, but a cosmic principle. His declaration that everything is water must sound strange to our modern ears, a naive guess from the dawn of science. But to hear it that way is to miss the profound spiritual insight hidden within his words. Thales was not simply identifying a chemical compound, he was pointing to water as the arche, the ultimate symbol of life, potential, and the unified source of all existence. Think of how water effortlessly changes form from the solidity of ice to the fluidity of a river to the invisible vapor of mist. It embodies the very principle of transformation, the ability of the one to become the many without ever losing its essential nature. In this single, elegant idea, Thales captured a truth that would echo through millennia of esoteric thought. Our own bodies are mostly water, the planet is dominated by it, life itself emerges from its nurturing flow. He was inviting us to see the universe not as a collection of separate objects, but as a single, flowing substance in a continuous state of becoming. This is where Western philosophy begins, not with a dry fact, but with a mystical recognition of unity. Can you feel the same essential wetness in a tear in the ocean and in the morning dew? That feeling is a glimpse of the arche. This vision of a primordial water would later flow directly into alchemy, where the quest began with the prima materia, the first matter, often depicted as a chaotic sea-awaiting order and spirit. It resonates in mystical traditions that speak of a cosmic ocean from which all worlds are born. Thales saw the entire cosmos as a living, breathing entity, and water was its soul, its most fundamental expression. To understand this was to achieve a profound inner shift, to feel your own life as part of this endless, circulating current. His philosophy was an invitation to dive beneath the surface of things and discover the fluid, unifying truth that connects the stars to the soil and to your own beating heart. Anaximander, a student of Thales, took this search for origins into even more profound and abstract territory. He looked at the world and realized that if everything we see is made of a specific element like water or fire, then that element itself must have come from somewhere else. What is the source of the source? His answer was a concept so radical it still echoes in modern physics and mysticism, the Apeiron, a Greek word meaning the boundless, the unlimited, the indefinite. He proposed that the ultimate reality is not any particular thing we can point to, but an eternal, ageless, and infinite reservoir from which all opposites emerge, and to which they all eventually return. Think of it not as a substance, but as a state of pure potential, a cosmic womb where hot and cold, wet and dry, light and dark are not yet separated. This was the first philosophical leap into the concept of the transcendent, a reality that exists beyond the world of our senses. Can you try to conceive of a reality that has no specific qualities, no beginning, and no end? The very attempt stretches the mind beyond its ordinary limits, and that is precisely the point. The Apeiron is not meant to be understood logically, but to be apprehended spiritually. In its boundless nature, we find a profound non-duality. It is the one thing that contains all apparent opposites without being defined by any of them. This idea resonates powerfully with the concept of Brahman and Advaita Vedanta, the formless absolute underlying the universe. It mirrors the Taoist idea of the unnameable Tao that gives rise to the 10,000 things. Anaximander was describing the same ineffable source that mystics in every tradition have tried to point toward with silence and paradox. To align with the Apeiron is to release our grip on fixed identities and comfortable categories, to embrace the formless ground of our own being. It is to find stability not in any particular thing, but in the infinite potential from which all things gracefully arise and gently fall away. Yet Anaximander's boundless infinite was not the final word from the city of Miletus. Another thinker, Anaximenes, offered a breathtakingly tangible answer to the same profound question. He proposed that the fundamental substance, the arche of all things, is air. But this was not merely the wind or the atmosphere. He called it pneuma, a word that means both breath and spirit, the very essence of life itself. In this single, elegant idea, Anaximenes bridged the cosmic and the personal in a way that still resonates across spiritual traditions today. He observed that air is invisible and yet absolutely vital. It is the breath that gives life to our bodies, and by extension, he saw it as the cosmic breath that animates the entire universe. Through a process of rarefaction and condensation, this universal breath becomes everything. When air is thinned out, it becomes fire, hot, and ethereal. When it is compressed and condensed, it becomes wind, then cloud, then water, then earth, and finally stone. The entire cosmos, from a flickering flame to a solid mountain, is just the one primal substance breathing in and out, changing its density in an eternal, living rhythm. Can you feel the connection between the air in your lungs and the air in the sky? That connection is the heart of his revelation. This concept of pneuma as the soul of the world finds a powerful echo in the yogic practice of pranayama, where the control of the physical breath is a means to harness prana, the universal life force energy. It mirrors the ancient Hebrew concept of ruach, the spirit wind of God that moved over the waters of creation. In countless traditions, spirit is not an abstract idea, it is a breath. Anaximenes was giving us a spiritual practice wrapped in a philosophical theory. To contemplate the air is to remember that you are not a separate entity breathing in a world, but a localized expression of the world's own breathing. Your soul, your psyche, is a gust of the cosmic wind, a temporary gathering of the universal spirit that will one day be released back into the boundless atmosphere. To know this is to feel a profound and immediate kinship with all of life, to understand that your every inhalation is a conversation with the cosmos. While the Milesians sought the arche intangible elements, a very different kind of philosopher emerged in southern Italy, one who found the fundamental substance not in water or air, but in number itself. Pythagoras established not just a school, but a secretive, ascetic brotherhood, a spiritual community where philosophy was a way of life dedicated to purifying the soul. His followers lived by strict rules, believing in the transmigration of souls, what we know as reincarnation. For Pythagoreans, the soul was immortal, journeying through multiple lifetimes, and the purpose of their philosophical and mathematical studies was to purify it, to break the cycle of rebirth and achieve unity with the divine. This was not a hobby, it was a sacred quest. They saw numbers not as dry abstractions, but as living, divine principles, the very building blocks of reality. The harmony of a plucked string, for instance, could be expressed in perfect numerical ratios. This discovery led them to a breathtaking cosmic vision, the music of the spheres. They proposed that the planets and stars, as they moved through the heavens, produced their own unique mathematical notes, creating a celestial symphony of perfect harmony. We cannot hear this music with our physical ears, they taught, because we are born into it, immersed in its constant vibration from the moment we draw our first breath. Can you sense the profound order hidden just beneath the chaos of daily life? This was the ultimate goal, to attune one's own soul to this cosmic music through intellectual and spiritual discipline. To understand the mathematics of a triangle or the orbit of a planet was to hear a single, clear note in the universal chorus, a step toward aligning one's inner being with the perfect, silent harmony of all that is. The Pythagorean community lived by a set of rules that seemed baffling from the outside, a collection of strange prohibitions and daily rituals. They famously refused to eat beans, they took vows of absolute secrecy, and each night they engaged in a rigorous self-examination. To dismiss these as mere superstition is to miss their entire purpose. These were not arbitrary rules, they were precise spiritual technologies, carefully designed exercises to purify the soul and align the individual with the mathematical harmony of the cosmos. Think of the bean prohibition. In the Pythagorean worldview, the soul was on a journey of transmigration, and beans were seen as potential vessels for a soul, or as foods that caused excessive flatulence and disturbed the body's inner equilibrium. The goal was to maintain a state of purity, to keep the physical temple of the body calm and ordered so the soul within could better hear the silent music of the spheres. Can you see how a simple dietary rule becomes a constant, daily reminder of a greater cosmic reality? The vow of secrecy served a similar function. It created a sacred container for their knowledge, protecting profound truths from being misunderstood or mocked by the uninitiated. More importantly, it cultivated an inward focus. True understanding was not for public display, it was a private, transformative realization that happened within the soul itself. But perhaps the most powerful practice was their nightly review. Before sleep, each member would ask themselves 3 questions. Where did I go wrong today? What good did I do? What duty did I leave unfulfilled? this was not about guilt, but about alignment. It was a daily recalibration of the self, a conscious effort to smooth out the dissonant notes introduced by fear, anger, or laziness, and to bring the individual soul back into tune with the universal harmony. These disciplines were a path to achieving what they called a clean heart, a soul so purified and ordered that it could finally perceive the divine logic woven into the fabric of existence, and in doing so, find its own eternal release. Yet the serene mathematical harmony of the Pythagoreans was soon met with a powerful, opposing vision from the city of Ephesus. Heraclitus, known as the Obscure, declared that the fundamental nature of reality is not eternal harmony, but eternal fire. He saw a cosmos where everything is in a state of relentless, flowing change. You cannot step into the same river twice, he famously stated, for fresh waters are ever flowing in upon you. This was not just a comment on rivers, but a radical description of existence itself. The person you were a moment ago is not the person you are now. The world is a constant process of becoming, a ceaseless flux where stability is an illusion. This idea of pantarei, everything flows, can feel unsettling, even chaotic. But Heraclitus saw a profound, divine order hidden within this very chaos. He called this hidden order the Logos, a universal reason and fire that structures all change. The Logos is the law that governs how things transform, the invisible pattern within the apparent randomness. Think of a growing flame. It is never the same from one instant to the next, constantly consuming fuel and changing form, yet it maintains a coherent shape and a predictable process. That is the Logos in action. Can you feel the pattern in your own life, the invisible thread connecting the person you were to the person you are becoming? To grasp this as the core of his esoteric teaching, the spiritual challenge, according to Heraclitus, is not to find a static truth to cling to, but to awaken to this ever-changing flow and align your own soul with the divine reason that guides it. Most people sleepwalk through life, he claimed, identifying with temporary forms and suffering when they inevitably dissolve. The wise person, however, learns to think with the Logos, to see the world as a living fire, and to find a dynamic peace by embracing the perpetual dance of creation and destruction. This is not a philosophy of despair, but one of profound liberation. By releasing our attachment to fixed outcomes and solid identities, we can learn to flow with the river of existence itself, discovering a fiery, intelligent harmony at the very heart of all change. The same eternal fire that consumes also illuminates. Heraclitus saw that this cosmic flame, the Logos, operates through a principle that defies our ordinary logic, the unity of opposites. He observed that the world is not a collection of separate things, but a dynamic tension between pairs of opposing forces. Day cannot exist without the concept of night. Peace is defined by its contrast to war. Health has no meaning without the experience of sickness. These are not mere opposites locked in battle, they are two sides of a single, inseparable coin. The tension between them is not a flaw in the universe, it is the very engine of existence, the hidden harmony that holds the cosmos together. Can you recognize how your own greatest periods of growth often emerged from moments of struggle? This is the Logos in your own life, weaving a coherent story from the push and pull of opposing experiences. This profound insight resonates perfectly with the ancient Chinese concept of yin and yang, where dark and light, feminine and masculine, are not enemies but complementary partners in a perpetual, creative dance. In Taoism, the Tao itself is the nameless source from which all these dualities spring, and wisdom lies in accepting and flowing with this natural rhythm. Heraclitus was articulating the same esoteric truth. The path forward is not to choose one side and eliminate the other, for that would collapse the whole system. It is to recognize the deeper, fiery intelligence that requires both. The bow and the lyre, he said, offer a perfect symbol. A bow only gains its power to launch an arrow from the intense tension between its two ends, pulled in opposite directions. A lyre produces beautiful music only because its strings are stretched tight between 2 points. Without this sacred tension, there is no music, no movement, no life. To align with the logos is to stop fighting the fundamental structure of reality and to understand that every ending is secretly a beginning and every loss contains the seed of a new discovery. From the fiery flux of Heraclitus came a voice of absolute stillness. In the Greek colony of Elea, the philosopher Parmenides presented a vision of reality so radical it shattered the very framework of his predecessors. He argued with unshakable logical force that all change, all motion, all difference and decay are nothing but a grand and convincing illusion. Our senses, he taught, lie to us constantly. The true nature of reality, which he called aletheia, or truth, is a single, eternal, unchanging, and perfect whole, which he called the One. Think of a perfect sphere, utterly solid and complete, with no empty space inside or outside it. This was his metaphor for being itself. It simply is, was, and always will be, without beginning or end, without any division or movement whatsoever. Can you try to conceive of a reality where nothing ever happens? The mind struggles and rebels because we are creatures of the senses, living in a world of constant happenings. But Parmenides insisted this world of happenings, which he called doxa, or mere opinion, is a deceptive dream. The flowing river Heraclitus described is not truly changing, the growing tree is not truly moving, and even your own aging body is not what it appears to be. The profound esoteric implication is that your true self, your soul, is not a temporary passenger in this world of illusion, but an inseparable part of that eternal, unchanging one. The spiritual path, according to this view, is not about learning to flow with change, but about awakening from the dream of change altogether. It is a journey inward, beyond the chatter of the senses, to discover the silent, unmoving core of your own being that has never been born and can never die. This is the ultimate promise of aletheia, a truth so absolute that it liberates the soul by revealing that the fears, desires, and sufferings born of a changing world have no ultimate reality. They are ripples on the surface of an ocean that is, in its deepest nature, forever still and profoundly complete. But how could anyone defend such a radical vision of a motionless reality? Parmenides had a brilliant student named Zeno, and his mission was to prove his teacher right by showing the entire world that its own senses were fundamentally unreliable. He did not offer new theories about the cosmos. Instead, he crafted a series of devastatingly simple thought experiments, known today as Zeno's paradoxes, which have puzzled great minds for 2,500 years. The most famous of these is the race between the swift hero Achilles and a slow-moving tortoise. Zeno argues that if the tortoise is given even the smallest head start, Achilles can never actually catch it. First, Achilles must reach the point where the tortoise began, but by the time he gets there, the tortoise has moved forward a little. Then Achilles must run to that new point, but again, the tortoise has advanced slightly further. This division continues forever into an infinite number of ever smaller steps. Achilles is always catching up to where the tortoise was, but never to where it is. Another paradox claims you can never even reach the door of your own room. To get to the door, you must first cross half the distance, then you must cross half of the remaining distance, and then half of what is left after that, and so on, forever. Your journey is fractured into an infinite series of halfway points, and thus, logically, can never be completed. Our eyes tell us we can move and touch things, but Zeno's logic seems to prove that all motion is an impossible illusion. Can you feel the unsettling crack these paradoxes create between what you think and what you experience? Zeno's true goal was not to solve a puzzle about running or walking. He was wielding pure logic as a spiritual weapon, dismantling our blind faith in a world of separate objects and constant change. If motion leads to such absurd and irresolvable conclusions, then the world presented by our senses must be false. The reality of many things moving through space and time collapses under its own logical weight. What remains is the only thing that can be true, the singular, undivided, and motionless one described by Parmenides. These paradoxes are not mere intellectual games, they are a direct assault on the world of doxa, of mere opinion. They force the mind to a standstill, to a point where reason itself must admit that the flowing, changing universe we perceive is a profound deception. To grasp Zeno's argument is to take the first, jarring step away from the dream of separation and toward the silent, unified truth of aletheia, where all such impossible journeys simply do not exist. Amidst the stark choice between a universe of pure flux and one of absolute stillness, a new voice offered a breathtaking synthesis. The philosopher Empedocles, a figure as mystical as he was scientific, proposed that reality is not one thing, but four. He called them the roots, the eternal and divine substances from which all things are woven: earth, air, fire, and water. Nothing is ever created or destroyed, he taught, only mixed and separated. A tree is a temporary combination of earthy solidity, watery sap, airy respiration, and the fiery energy of growth. A human being is a walking symphony of these four roots. But what force orchestrates this cosmic dance? Empedocles unveiled a profound dualism, two great cosmic powers in an eternal embrace: love and strife. Love, which he called philia, is the force of attraction, unity, and harmony. It draws the roots together, compelling them to mix and form complex, beautiful wholes, from a single flower to an entire living planet. Strife, or nikos, is the force of repulsion, separation, and division. It pulls things apart, returning composite beings to their separate elements. Can you feel these two forces at play in your own life, the moments of deep connection and the times of necessary separation? This is not a battle between good and evil, but a necessary, rhythmic cycle. Under the increasing influence of love, the universe coalesces into a perfect, harmonious sphere, a unified divine being where all distinction dissolves in bliss. Then strife inevitably enters, shattering this unity, driving the roots apart to create the world of separate, individual things we know. This is the esoteric heart of his cosmology, a universe that breathes, expanding into diversity through strife and contracting into unity through love, over and over for all eternity. Your soul, for Empedocles, is an active participant in this grand cycle. He believed passionately in reincarnation, that the soul journeys through countless lives, from plants to animals to humans, driven by the very forces of love and strife. A life filled with aggression and separation is a life ruled by strife, reinforcing the illusion of isolation. A life of compassion, creativity, and connection is one where philia dominates, allowing the soul to remember its true, unified nature. The ultimate spiritual goal is to purify oneself from the polluting influence of strife, to cultivate love so completely that the soul can finally escape the wheel of rebirth and rejoin the blessed, unified sphere of divine existence. Your life, in this view, is a single phase in the soul's immense journey back to cosmic wholeness, a journey guided by the timeless push and pull between coming together and falling apart. Empedocles was no ordinary philosopher, quietly contemplating in a garden. He walked through the crowded streets of ancient Sicily as a living legend, a charismatic figure who declared himself an immortal god walking among mortals. He was a poet whose words could enchant, a healer who claimed to hold power over life and death, and a mystic who spoke of his own past lives with startling intimacy. In one of his surviving fragments, he makes an extraordinary confession: "I have been a boy and a girl, a bush and a bird, and a dumb fish leaping out of the sea." This was not metaphor alone, it was the testimony of a soul that remembered its long journey through the cycle of reincarnation. Can you hear the shamanic power in those words? He presented himself as a bridge between worlds, a man who had transcended the human condition through spiritual purification and now offered to guide others on the same path. His philosophy of the four roots and the cosmic forces of love and strife was not just a theory to be studied, it was a map for the soul's ascent, a set of instructions for cleansing oneself of the spiritual pollution caused by strife, the force of separation and conflict. He taught that our greatest errors arise from trusting our senses over the deeper truth of unity, and that by cultivating love, we could begin to perceive the divine connections that bind all of existence. His followers believed he could control the winds and bring rain, acts that blurred the line between philosophy and magic. For Empedocles, to know the cosmos was to command its elements, because the purified soul, having remembered its own divine nature, naturally realigns the world around it. He was the shaman poet, weaving together reason, religion, and mystical power into a single, breathtaking vision of human potential, a living example of the ultimate goal, to escape the wheel of rebirth and return to the blissful unity of the divine sphere. While Empedocles embodied the shamanic power of a unified cosmos, another thinker was peering into the very mechanics of its creation. Anaximander, living in the vibrant intellectual center of Athens, proposed a theory of such startling sophistication it still feels modern. He imagined the beginning not as a single substance, but as an infinite, chaotic mixture of all things, every possible seed of every possible substance, from the gold in a crown to the flesh in a lion, was present in this primordial state, a cosmic fog where everything was in everything. But then something extraordinary happened. A force, which he called nous, meaning mind or intelligence, initiated a great cosmic whirl. This was not a blind, mechanical process. Nous is a conscious, infinite, and self-governing power, the one thing that exists completely separate from the mixture, and it acted with perfect knowledge and purpose. It set the universe spinning, and in that divine rotation, it began to separate and sort the seeds, pulling like with like, gradually imposing a beautiful, intelligent order onto the primordial chaos. Can you feel the profound shift in this idea? The universe is not just ordered, it is the product of a cosmic mind. The esoteric significance of nous is breathtaking. For the first time in Western thought, a philosopher explicitly identified a conscious, intelligent principle as the fundamental governor of reality. This is not a personal God in a human image, but something far more abstract and profound, a universal intellect that knows all things and orchestrates the cosmos through a rational plan. Anaximander was describing a forerunner to what would later be called the world's soul, the divine logos, or in Platonic thought, the demiurge, the cosmic craftsman who shapes the world according to perfect, eternal forms. This idea resonates across countless spiritual traditions that speak of a universal consciousness dreaming the world into being. The practical, spiritual implication for us is direct and transformative. If the cosmos itself is the expression of a supreme intelligence, then our own human capacity for reason, our own spark of mind, is a fragment of that very same nous. To cultivate your own intelligence, to seek knowledge and clarity, is not a merely human pursuit. It is an active participation in the divine. It is a way of aligning your own small, individual mind with the vast, cosmic mind that conceived the stars and the seasons. Your deepest moments of insight and understanding are not just personal breakthroughs. They are whispers of the nous remembering itself through you. This transforms the quest for knowledge from a dry academic exercise into the most sacred of spiritual practices, a homecoming of the soul to its original, intelligent source. Yet another philosopher looked at the seamless whole envisioned by Parmenides and asked a startling question: what if the one is actually many? Leucippus and his brilliant student Democritus proposed a theory so radical it would take 2,000 years for science to catch up. They called it atomism. They reasoned that if you were to take any piece of matter and cut it in half, then cut it again and again, you would eventually reach a point where it could be cut no further. This final, indivisible particle they named the atom, meaning uncuttable. But for these atoms to move and combine, they argued, there must be empty space for them to move through. They called this the void, an infinite, featureless emptiness. The entire cosmos, then, is nothing but an infinite swarm of these eternal, indestructible atoms swirling in an infinite void, colliding, locking together, and breaking apart in a ceaseless, mechanical dance. There is no need for a guiding intelligence like Anaxagoras' nous, no cosmic forces of love and strife. The universe operates by sheer, blind necessity, a cosmic billiards game on an infinite table. Can you grasp the sheer, stark beauty of this vision? It is a universe without a puppeteer, where everything that happens, from the formation of a star to the firing of a thought in your brain, is the direct and inevitable result of atoms in motion. This was a completely materialistic and mechanistic view of reality, the final, logical step in the pre-Socratic search for a fundamental substance. The arche was not one thing like water or fire, but an infinite number of tiny, invisible building blocks, each one a seed of reality, eternal and unchanging in its own nature. The soul itself, Democritus suggested, was composed of especially fine, smooth, and spherical soul atoms, which dispersed back into the cosmic swarm upon death. This seems to strip the world of all magic, yet it contains a profound and almost mystical implication of its own. If the cosmos is infinite in both its atoms and its void, then every possible combination of atoms must eventually occur. Somewhere in the boundless expanse, there is another Earth, another you, living a life nearly identical or wildly different from your own. Every story has been written, every life has been lived in an endless tapestry of cosmic probability. This idea of a multiverse, born from pure reason, carries a strange spiritual comfort. Your joys and sorrows are not singular events, but part of an infinite, eternal pattern. Your very existence is a statistical miracle, a temporary constellation of atoms that is gathered to form a conscious self, able to look back upon the infinite void from which it came and wonder at its own nature. The universe of the atomists is vast, impersonal, and devoid of divine purpose, and in that very emptiness, it offers a different kind of freedom, the freedom of knowing you are a unique and fleeting arrangement of the eternal seeds of reality, dancing for a moment in the grand, silent dark. Yet this vision of a soul made of atoms, destined to dissolve, might seem to lead only to a cold and meaningless existence. Democritus himself arrived at the opposite conclusion. For him, the ultimate purpose of life, the true goal of philosophy, was not to despair over this mechanistic universe, but to achieve a profound state of inner peace he called euthymia, a cheerful tranquility of the soul. If the cosmos is just atoms and void, then all our fears about gods, death, and fate are based on illusions. Our suffering arises from misplaced desires for wealth, fame, and permanence in a world that is inherently transient and material. True happiness, he taught, comes from understanding this reality and aligning your desires with it. Euthymia is not a frantic pursuit of pleasure, but a deep, steady contentment found by limiting your wants, cultivating self-knowledge, and freeing yourself from the turbulent winds of external fortune. Can you feel the radical freedom in that idea? Your inner state no longer needs to be a puppet jerked about by the strings of a chaotic world. This was a spiritual revolution hidden inside a materialistic science. The path to this cheerfulness was through moderation. Democritus advised against seeking endless riches or social status, for these are bottomless pits that create more anxiety than they satisfy. True wealth, he said, is having few needs. He championed a life of balance where joy is found in the simple, measurable pleasures of friendship, good conversation, and the contemplation of nature. To study the cosmos and see its atomic truth was, for him, a form of therapy, recognizing that your body and your sorrows are temporary arrangements of particles helps to dissolve the grip of overwhelming emotion. Your fear of death loses its power when you see it not as a terrifying judgment, but as a natural dispersal of the soul atoms back into the eternal dance of the universe. This serene acceptance is the very heart of euthymia. His philosophy directly prefigures the Stoicism that would emerge centuries later with its core goal of apatheia, or freedom from destructive passions, achieved by understanding and accepting the rational order of nature. It echoes in Buddhist teachings that identify suffering with craving and attachment to impermanent things. Democritus gave us a map for finding spiritual light not by looking up to the heavens, but by looking deeply into the nature of things right here, discovering that the key to a cheerful soul was to see the world and yourself exactly as it is. But this serene materialist philosophy was not the only challenge to the old myths. A wandering poet and sage named Xenophanes looked at the traditional stories of the Greek gods and delivered a critique so sharp it forever changed the Western conception of the divine. He observed a simple yet devastating truth about human nature. Ethiopians, he said, make their gods snub-nosed and black. Thracians make theirs blue-eyed and red-haired. And if horses or oxen could draw, they would depict their gods as horses and oxen. His point was a thunderclap of reason. We create gods in our own image, projecting our own human forms, our own flaws, and our own tribal prejudices onto the cosmos. The gods of Olympus, with their petty jealousies, their deceptions, and their all-too-human appetites, were nothing more than the magnified shadows of humanity itself. Can you recognize that same tendency today to fashion a divine image that simply confirms our own existing beliefs? This was not just a critique of religion, it was an invitation to a far grander vision. In place of these many limited deities, Xenophanes proposed a single, supreme God. This being was utterly unlike any god conceived before. It was not physical, not human-like, and did not move. It was a pure, cosmic mind, a consciousness that governed the entire universe without effort, shaking all things by the thought of his mind alone. This was a God of pure abstraction, a divine principle that permeates and directs reality through intellect, not through physical force. The spiritual leap required to grasp this is immense. It demands we let go of the comforting, familiar image of a superhuman parent in the sky and open ourselves to a formless, all-encompassing intelligence. Xenophanes was clearing away the anthropomorphic rubble to make space for a truly philosophical and esoteric divinity. This single, motionless God, connected to the world through pure thought, is a direct ancestor of Aristotle's unmoved mover, the Neoplatonic one, and the abstract God of later philosophical theology. It resonates with mystical traditions that speak of a divine reality beyond all names and forms. To align with this God is not to pray for favors, but to cultivate your own capacity for pure thought, to still the body and quiet the personal self in an attempt to resonate with the silent, shaking mind of the universe. This was a pivotal turn inward, where the soul's journey became a quest to meet not a person, but a principle, to know the one being whose very thought is the fabric of your existence. The dry earth of a northern Greek tomb miraculously preserved a fragile, crumbling scroll. Known today as the Derveni Papyrus, this ancient manuscript is our single most important direct source for understanding how these radical ideas were actually used. It is not a formal philosophical treatise, but something far more revealing, a first-century commentary written by an unknown pre-Socratic thinker. His goal was to decode an Orphic creation poem, a deeply mystical and religious text, using the very tools forged by philosophers like Heraclitus and Anaximander. This is the lost key, a living demonstration of pre-Socratic esotericism in action. The author approaches the ancient verses not as literal truth, but as a complex allegory waiting to be unlocked by reason. When the poem speaks of Zeus swallowing a great phallus to become the ruler of the cosmos, the commentator does not see a crude myth. He explains it as a profound symbol for the cosmic nous, the universal mind, absorbing the generative power of the universe to establish its intelligent order. Can you sense the seismic shift in interpretation? This is the moment philosophy and mysticism merge. The commentator systematically translates the gods of the poem into the elements and principles of the new philosophy. Hera becomes the nourishing air, Oceanus represents the flowing principle of all things, and the Titan Kronos is not a devouring father, but the relentless, unstoppable motion of the cosmic whirl. The papyrus shows us that these early philosophers were not trying to destroy religion, but to transform it. They sought to uncover a deeper, more rational truth hidden within the sacred stories, believing that the ancient poets were actually speaking in code about the nature of reality, a code that only their new philosophical language could finally decipher. This single charred document is a window into a lost world of thought, where the fire of Heraclitus and the mind of Anaximander were not dry academic concepts, but living keys meant to unlock the deepest mysteries of the soul and the cosmos. The Derveni Papyrus is a rare and precious survivor, but its charred state tells a deeper story about the fate of these first philosophers. The vast majority of their original writings are simply gone, vanished into the ashes of time. We know their ideas today not from their own scrolls, but as scattered fragments, brief quotations, and summaries preserved by later thinkers who had their own agendas. This is the great irony of the pre-Socratic legacy. their revolutionary voices reach us almost entirely through the filters of their intellectual successors. Plato, Aristotle, and centuries later, the Christian Church Fathers all quoted these early thinkers, but they did so to support their own arguments, to refute a rival idea, or to illustrate a point in history. They were not neutral librarians, but curators with a purpose. When Aristotle discusses Thales or Anaximander, he is often analyzing their work through the lens of his own sophisticated system of causes. He presents them as stepping stones on the path to his own philosophy, simplifying their complex, often mystical insights into neat categories of material cause. The profound, lived spirituality of aligning with the arche or the logos was often stripped away, reduced to a primitive guess about the physical world. Can you feel how a single quote, pulled out of its original context, might lose its soul? The Church Fathers, like Clement of Alexandria, performed a different kind of surgery. They preserved snippets of pre-Socratic thought, but only those they could use to argue that Greek philosophy was a dim foreshadowing of Christian truth, or that its errors proved the superiority of revealed religion. A line from Heraclitus about the Logos could be presented as a pagan prophecy of the Gospel of John, while the atomism of Democritus was dismissed as a godless materialism. This selective preservation created a distorted portrait. The more esoteric, mystical, and spiritually transformative dimensions of their work were the first to be filtered out, deemed irrelevant, unsystematic, or even dangerous by later commentators who valued logical consistency and doctrinal purity above all else. We're left with a collection of brilliant, disjointed puzzle pieces, while the living, breathing picture of their philosophical way of life has been almost completely erased. The true loss is not just the texts themselves, but the understanding that for these pioneers, wisdom was a fire to be lived, not just a concept to be debated. These forgotten ideas of primal elements and cosmic transformation did not vanish with the philosophers. They flowed like an underground river, resurfacing centuries later to fuel one of history's most enduring and mysterious quests, the art of alchemy. The alchemists of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance were the direct spiritual descendants of the Pre-Socratics, inheriting their core belief that the physical world was a manifestation of hidden spiritual principles. The entire alchemical pursuit of transmuting base lead into perfect gold was built upon the foundation laid in Ionia and Elea. Thales' vision of a primordial water became the alchemist's mercury, the fluid, feminine principle of spirit that permeates all matter. Heraclitus' eternal, intelligent fire was their sulfur, the active, masculine principle of soul and transformation, the agent of change that burns away impurity. And Empedocles' four roots, earth, air, fire, and water, provided the essential qualitative framework for all alchemical operations. The alchemist's laboratory was a microcosm of the Empedoclean universe, a place where these elements were constantly separated and recombined by the cosmic forces of love and strife, which they called solve et coagula, to dissolve and to coagulate. Can you see the direct lineage? The blackening of matter in the flask was not just a chemical reaction, it was the reign of strife, the necessary dissolution of form. The final stage, the coveted reddening that produced the philosopher's stone, was the ultimate triumph of love, the perfect, harmonious union of all opposing qualities into a new, divine substance. This was never merely about metallurgy. The transmutation of metal was always a mirror for the transmutation of the alchemist's own soul. The goal was to take the base lead of the unawakened, chaotic self subject to passions and illusions, and through the fiery trials of spiritual practice, refine it into the gold of a purified, enlightened consciousness, a soul aligned with the cosmic logos. The Pre-Socratics provided the original map for this inner journey, a map that taught that to understand the elements of the world is to master the elements of the self. These lost rivers of thought did not simply run dry. They converged in the mind of one man, a philosopher who would channel their esoteric currents into the very bedrock of Western spirituality, Plato. His most famous theory, the realm of perfect and eternal forms, is a direct philosophical descendant of Parmenides' unchanging one. Just as Parmenides dismissed the sensory world as a deceptive dream of doxa, Plato taught that the world we see is a shadowy, imperfect copy of a higher reality. The perfect form of a circle exists not on any piece of paper, but in a transcendent dimension of pure being, forever flawless and unchanging. Can you sense the lineage? The world of becoming, with its decaying trees and fading beauty, is the world of Heraclitean flux. The world of being, the realm of the forms, is the Parmenidean one, now multiplied into a hierarchy of perfect archetypes. But Plato did more than just split reality in two. He sought to explain how the two worlds connect, and for this, he reached for another pre-Socratic idea. Anaximander had introduced nous, the cosmic mind that orders the universe. Plato transformed this concept into the world's soul, a divine, intelligent principle that permeates the cosmos, acting as a living intermediary between the eternal forms and the physical world. The world's soul is the craftsman, imprinting the perfect pattern of the form of a tree onto the chaotic stuff of matter, resulting in the imperfect trees we see around us. This was not a cold, mechanical process, but an act of intelligent love, a desire of the divine to manifest perfect beauty in the physical realm. Yet the most intriguing part of Plato's legacy may be what he chose not to write down. Ancient sources insist that his most profound, esoteric teachings were reserved for oral discussions within his academy, deliberately kept from public texts. What if these unwritten doctrines were the true culmination of the pre-Socratic mystical path? It is compelling to consider that in his private lectures, Plato wove these threads into an even grander tapestry, perhaps describing the very process by which the human soul, a fragment of the world soul, could undertake the journey back from the shadow world of copies to reunite with the luminous reality of the forms themselves. This would make his entire philosophy not just a system of thought, but a direct continuation of the transformative spiritual practice first mapped by Thales, Heraclitus, and Parmenides, a hidden path for the soul's ascent back to its divine source. That single unifying source the pre-Socratics called the arche did not vanish with their scrolls. It flowed like an underground river, resurfacing centuries later to nourish two of the most powerful philosophical systems of the ancient world, Stoicism and Neoplatonism. The Stoics looked at the chaotic, unpredictable nature of human life and sought an unshakable foundation for peace. They found it in the work of Heraclitus. His concept of the logos, the universal fire and reason that orders all change, became the very heart of their philosophy. For the Stoics, the logos was divine reason itself, a rational, intelligent principle that permeates every atom of the cosmos. They called it God or nature, a single, living, breathing entity of which we are all a part. Your own individual reason, they taught, is a literal fragment of this cosmic logos, a spark of the divine fire. Can you feel the profound responsibility that comes with that idea? Every thought you have is a thought of the universe thinking through you. The entire Stoic path to tranquility, their famous apatheia, was built on this foundation. To live in accordance with nature meant to align your personal will with the perfect, rational will of the logos. When you face a hardship, a loss, or an unexpected turn of events, the Stoic practice is to see it not as a personal tragedy, but as an expression of the logos. It is the universe, in its infinite wisdom, unfolding exactly as it must. Your job is not to rage against the fire of change, but to understand its reason and accept its course with virtuous grace. This was the ultimate spiritual application of Heraclitus's vision, transforming the cosmic flux from a source of anxiety into the very ground of a serene and meaningful life. While the Stoics found God in the rational order of the world, another group of thinkers sought the divine in a realm far beyond it. The Neoplatonists, led by the luminous figure of Plotinus, turned their gaze back to the stark, magnificent vision of Parmenides. They embraced his concept of the one, that perfect, unchanging, and utterly transcendent reality beyond all names and forms. But Plotinus and his followers built an entire cosmic ladder upon this foundation, creating one of the most intricate and influential esoteric systems in history. They explain that from this ineffable one, reality necessarily overflows, like light radiating from a brilliant sun or water bubbling from an infinite spring. The first emanation from the One is the divine mind, nous, a realm of perfect Platonic forms where all ideas exist in a state of pure, simultaneous knowledge. From this mind emanates the world soul, the animating principle that breathes life into the physical cosmos and individual human souls. Finally, at the farthest reach of this outpouring, we find the material world, the world of our senses. Can you see the profound spiritual map they created? The entire universe is a grand procession from absolute unity into the diversity of matter, and the soul's ultimate purpose is to make the return journey home. This is the famous path of epistrophy. The souls turn within and upward. Through deep contemplation and the purification of desire, the soul can ascend past the distractions of the body, past the beautiful forms in the world's soul, past even the brilliant knowledge of the divine mind, to achieve a state of mystical union with the One itself. Plotinus himself was said to have experienced this ecstatic union multiple times in his life. This was not an intellectual understanding, but a direct, wordless merging, a blowing out of the individual self into the brilliant darkness of the Absolute. This Neoplatonic system, built directly upon the pre-Socratic quest for the One, became the hidden architecture for vast stretches of Western mysticism, from Christian theology to the Renaissance Magi, offering a detailed roadmap for the soul's ascent back to its silent, radiant source. Centuries after Neoplatonism faded from the academies, the underground river of pre-Socratic thought found a new spring in the depths of the modern psyche. The pioneering psychologist Carl Jung saw in these ancient fragments not dead theories, but living symbols of the human soul's enduring structure. He was particularly captivated by Heraclitus, the philosopher of eternal flux and the unity of opposites. Jung recognized in these ideas a perfect map for the psyche's own turbulent landscape. The tension of opposites, which Heraclitus saw as the engine of the cosmos, was for Jung the very source of psychic energy and growth. Our inner conflicts between courage and fear, love and hate, are not signs of failure, but the necessary friction that propels us toward wholeness. Can you feel that same creative tension within yourself? Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, that vast reservoir of shared human archetypes and inherited psychic potential, resonates powerfully with Anaximander's Apeiron, the boundless source from which all forms emerge. He believed that the pre-Socratics were not merely thinking, they were dreaming aloud, giving voice to the primordial patterns that underlie all human experience. For Jung, to engage with their ideas was to perform a kind of archaeology of the soul, unearthing the bedrock upon which our modern consciousness is built. This was not a retreat into the past, but a vital reconnection with the timeless, psychic forces that shape our reality. The New Age movement, in its search for a spirituality beyond traditional religion, unknowingly embraced this same pre-Socratic current. Its central tenet that everything is energy is a direct echo of the search for the arche. When a modern practitioner speaks of vibrating at a higher frequency or seeks to align their personal energy with the universe, they are walking a path first cleared by Heraclitus and his cosmic fire, by Anaximenes and his universal breath. The dynamic living cosmologies of the pre-Socratics, where the world is a single, intelligent, and ever-changing entity, provide a philosophical backbone for the intuitive feeling that mind and matter are not separate, but deeply intertwined. The questions that haunted those first thinkers are the very ones that define our modern quest. What is the relationship between consciousness and the physical world? Is reality a solid, external thing, or is it, as Parmenides might suggest, a construct of mind? The current explorations into quantum physics, where the observer seems to affect the observed, would not have surprised them. Their radical inquiries into the fundamental nature of being have never been more relevant, offering not dusty answers, but timeless questions that continue to guide us toward a deeper understanding of who we are and what this universe truly is. Their profound wisdom was never truly a set of theories, but a living path. The pre-Socratics saw a cosmos that was intelligent, breathing, and sacred, a unified whole where the human soul was not a stranger but an intimate participant in a grand, cosmic story. Their lost knowledge reveals a universe where everything is interconnected, from the boundless Apeiron to the dancing atoms in the void, all governed by a divine reason, a logos that invites our own consciousness to align with it. For them, philosophy was not an academic exercise, it was a spiritual technology for the soul's journey, a means of purification to escape the wheel of rebirth, to find cheerfulness in a material world, or to achieve a mystical union with the Silent One. This was the original Western esoteric path, a fusion of reason and revelation that sought to transform the knower from the inside out. The history we are commonly taught often reduces these visionaries to primitive scientists, their deepest insights filtered away. Yet their questions about the nature of reality and consciousness are more urgent today than ever. I encourage you to look beyond the conventional narrative. Explore the fragments of Thales, Heraclitus, and Parmenides for yourself. In their ancient words, you may just discover a timeless key, a forgotten mirror that reflects not only the nature of the cosmos, but the deepest, most essential truth of your own being.